us on our new and updated website, channelafrica.co.za. It's time for Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla. Stay tuned for insights, impact, and inspiration right here on Channel Africa. Available on the Channel Africa app. Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
And it is 9 p.m., 2100 hours Standard South African time or Central African time, wherever you're listening from, watching from. A warm welcome to you. I am indeed Tsepiso Makwetla. 60 minutes of the very latest news as we bring you developments around the continent and from all corners of the globe. We bring you various voices, all the faces and all the perspectives that matter right here on Africa World Hour. Let's start now with the top stories this hour.
1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Malawi's President Peter Mutharika has expanded his cabinet from 24 to 28 members in a reshuffle that has scrapped the Ministry of State and split the Ministry of Natural Resources, Energy and Mining into two distinct portfolios. This marks the first major shake-up since Mutharika's inauguration in October 2025. While some have praised the abolition of the Minister of State position, human rights activist Benedicto Kondowe has questioned the logic of a larger cabinet. George Mango reports from Blantyre, Malawi.
President Peter Mutharika has signaled a new direction for his administration. In this cabinet reshuffle, the president has introduced 4 new faces to the executive, doubling the number of deputy ministers from 3 to 7. However, the expansion has been met with stiff criticism regarding the cost of government. Human rights campaigner Benedicto Kondowe argues the move contradicts the president's campaign rhetoric regarding a leaner, more efficient government.
And moving on, South Africa announcing plans to establish a one-stop border post at the Beitbridge port of entry in collaboration with Zimbabwe. The move is aimed at improving border efficiency and easing congestion. Border Management Authority Commissioner Michael Masiapata made the announcement during an overnight visit to Beitbridge as thousands of travellers return to South Africa after the holidays. The project, expected to begin construction later this year, pending parliamentary approval, forms part of government's broader strategy to modernise border operations through a public-private partnership. Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe has more. And staying in South Africa, 47-year-old foreign national has been arrested and 10 teenage boys rescued in Malbarton, south of Johannesburg. Police were alerted to a group of 8 half-naked teenagers walking on foot. Police spokesperson Katlego Mogale says officers established that the teenagers were foreign nationals who could not speak English. Mogale says officers were also informed that there were 2 more boys who had already been taken away in a blue VW Jetta.
The vehicle was later intercepted along the street, but the driver fled, resulting in a high-speed chase which ended in Commissioner Street, with the subsequent arrest of the suspect and the rescue of the 2 half-naked teenagers. The suspect will appear in the Boysens Magistrates Court on Thursday, the 8th of January 2025, on charges of being an illegal immigrant and suspected trafficking in persons. Further investigations are underway. The provincial head of the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigation in Gauteng, Major General Ibrahim Kadwa, noted the multidisciplinary effort displayed by the team in the combating of trafficking in persons in the province.
And South Africa's African National Congress Party has added its voice to those condemning the U.S. attack on Venezuela and the capture of its president, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife. The couple pleaded not guilty yesterday in their first New York court appearance. ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula says the attack is a violation of the UN Charter and violates what the party stands for. He's addressed the media in Rustenburg in the Northwest Province.
To this extent, we have resolved to work with all the progressive forces in our country and mobilize against the American imperialist aggression, including against our own country. Folding arms, looking on, and doing nothing will mean that we have abandoned the cause of fighting for justice.
In Venezuela, authorities have intensified their crackdown on political opponents since the United States seized President Nicolas Maduro at the weekend. Armed police are patrolling streets of Caracas. The BBC's Mimi Swabi has more on those details.
Alongside an increased military and police presence, armed citizen militias, at the order of the government, are reportedly combing the streets, quashing any celebrations of the US operation. The Union of Journalists and Media Workers say at least 14 journalists were detained on Monday. They've all since been released, although one was deported. Images have been shared online of Venezuelans holding signs rejecting Delcy Rodriguez as the interim president. However, many are scared to take to the streets or publicly express US support, fearing heavy-handed repercussions.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is holding talks with his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron at the Élysée Palace, where ahead of meetings with Ukraine's allies, they will discuss peace efforts with Russia. Moscow launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine almost 4 years ago. The BBC's James Waterhouse has more.
What senior Ukrainian and European figures want to discuss are concrete military promises to ensure Russia won't invade again, should an agreement be reached to stop the fighting. What they really want is the White House to underwrite such an arrangement. An advisor to the French President, Emmanuel Macron, has admitted to another goal too, to make sure the US does not abandon Ukraine. However, the agenda will undoubtedly be shaped by Washington's extraordinary intervention in Venezuela and Donald Trump's repeated desires for the Danish territory of Greenland.
And finally, China has tightened controls on exports to Japan that could be used for military purposes, further escalating a dispute between them over Taiwan. The Commerce Ministry in Beijing says the new measures will take effect immediately. The BBC's Steve Jackson has the details.
Tensions have risen between the two economic giants since Japan's new Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi, said her country could respond militarily if China attacked Taiwan. Beijing has already imposed travel restrictions hitting Japan's tourism sector, along with banning seafood imports and cancelling trade delegations. China has not specified which goods are covered by its latest export ban on items that could have military uses, but it's likely to apply to key sectors, including telecoms and aerospace. As Beijing ratchets up its threats to Taiwan, its rift with Japan appears to be growing.
Your life, your rhythm, your Africa. Channel Africa. Find it for free on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Nighttime radio, just the way you like it. On Channel Africa, where the night comes alive. Stay tuned to Channel Africa. Stream us on our new and updated website, channelafrica.co.za.
And at 8 minutes past 9, let's go on to one of our top stories. In fact, it is the main story today. The United Nations Security Council, as we told you yesterday, met to debate the legality of a United States military operation that led to the capture of Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela. Maduro is facing trial now in New York on drug-related charges, including conspiracy to commit narco-terrorism. The move has sharply divided the council, with several members warning it could undermine international law. Our reporter Lebogang Mabange has more.
The United Nations has cautioned against unilateral use of force as the Security Council grappled with the implications of the U.S. operation in Venezuela. Briefing the Council, the UN's political affairs chief urged member states to adhere strictly to international law and the UN Charter. Rosemary DiCarlo is the Under Secretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs.
In situations as confused as complex as the one we now face, it is important to stick to principles. Respect for the UN Charter and all other applicable legal frameworks to safeguard peace and security. Respect for the principles of sovereignty, political independence, and territorial integrity of states. The prohibition of the threat or use of force. The power of the law must prevail. International law contains tools to address issues such as illicit traffic in narcotics, disputes about resources, and human rights concerns. This is the route we need to take.
Concerns were also raised about what some described as a growing pattern of threats against sovereign states. President of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, Jeffrey Sachs, told the Council.
In the past month, President Trump has issued direct threats against 6 UN member states, including Colombia, Denmark, Iran, Mexico, Nigeria, and of course, Venezuela. Members of the Council are not called upon to judge Nicolas Maduro. They are not called upon to assess whether the recent U.S. attack and ongoing naval quarantine results in freedom or in subjugation. Members of the Council are called upon to defend international law, and specifically the UN Charter.
The United States, however, defended its actions, rejecting claims that it had launched a war against Venezuela. United States Ambassador to the United Nations, Michael Waltz.
The United States successfully carried out a surgical law enforcement operation facilitated by the U.S. military against 2 indicted fugitives of American justice, narco-terrorist Nicolas Maduro and Celia Flores. There is no war against Venezuela or its people. We are not occupying a country. This was a law enforcement operation in furtherance of lawful indictments that have existed for decades. The United States arrested a narco-trafficker who is now going to stand trial in the United States in accordance with the rule of law for the crimes he's committed against our people for 15 years.
South Africa was among the countries that strongly opposed the operation, warning it could destabilize the global order. South Africa's statement, delivered by political counsellor and acting deputy permanent representative to the UN, Jonathan Passmore.
The unilateral military strikes carried out by the United States of America against Venezuela and the abduction of President Nicolas Maduro and his spouse from Venezuelan territory for transfer to the United States wantonly violates the sovereignty and territorial integrity and independence of Venezuela. These actions are also in stark contrast to our established legal norms, reinforcing the belief that might is right and undermining diplomacy. History has repeatedly demonstrated that military invasions against sovereign states yield only instability and deepen crises. Unlawful unilateral force of this nature undermines the stability of the international order and the principle of equality among nations.
As divisions persist within the Security Council, calls are growing for restraint and a recommitment to the UN Charter, with several member states warning that how this crisis is handled could set a far-reaching precedent for international law and global peace. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And now to just take a look at what's been happening in the United States, the reaction following the abduction of Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela, as it's been quoted by many critics of the U.S. action, even though the U.S. says it is purely a security operation. But we've also seen reports of protests against the action by some U.S. citizens. But let's get a sense of what is exactly happening and the type of political landscape all of this occurs in the United States. We're joined on the line now by California Post opinion editor Joel Polak. Joel, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us.
It's good to be with you.
So in your point of view, how would you categorize this moment for U.S. President Donald Trump, his second term, particularly given that this also happens to fall on the 6th of January anniversary of the storming of the Capitol?
Well, I don't think one has anything to do with the other, but it is a significant foreign policy and military success. The Maduro regime has come to an end. and will be replaced eventually by a democratically elected legitimate government. And this was achieved without the loss of any American soldiers. And it's the second such military operation in President Trump's second term. You'll recall the successful nuclear strike, or it wasn't a nuclear strike, but a strike on the nuclear sites in Iran, which was also a success and involved no American casualties. So Americans are overwhelmingly supportive of President Trump's success in foreign policy. There are some domestic opponents, many of whom are Democrats, who clamored for Maduro's arrest when President Joe Biden was president. So to the extent you're seeing some opposition to it, it's largely just about domestic politics, and some of the same people had the opposite point of view just a few months ago. But this is being viewed as a success by most of the American people.
So you say there's overwhelming support from this, but it's not just Democrats. Ordinary American citizens are going out on social media, writing opinion pieces about the fact that they believe it is against not only the UN Charter, pointing to Article 2, subsection 4, but also just speaking about, the understanding of international sovereignty. So I asked a question with regards to the anniversary because I also want to understand the holistic understanding of US President Donald Trump's legacy. And obviously you have your opinion, others have their opinion, but is there cohesion in not only what he promised, but what he's delivering?
Absolutely. President Trump promised to take the fight to the drug cartels, and Nicolas Maduro was running a large drug trafficking operation using the Venezuelan state. And that's what President Trump attacked, and did so very successfully. Now, in terms of international law, there's nothing illegal about what the United States did at all. And it's interesting that people who are complaining about American intervention had very little or nothing to say about the Russians being involved in Venezuela, the Cubans being involved in Venezuela, Hezbollah, terror organizations. That's against UN resolutions to harbor or support terror organizations on your territory. So, the question of international law is a fairly settled one, and there have been ample legal precedents for similar operations. And as far as the domestic critics, many of them are far left-wing, quite marginal groups, and some of the people you're seeing protesting are habitual protesters. You should also look at the large numbers of Venezuelan expatriates who've come out on the streets of cities like Los Angeles, where I am right now, or Miami, where there's a large Venezuelan population, who are celebrating what the United States did and thanking Donald Trump, because now, finally, there's a path to freedom for this Venezuelan people.
But we're also talking about international law here, Joe, where Article 2.4, as I mentioned, explicitly prohibits force against territorial integrity or political independence. Article 2, subsection 2, non-intervention principle except where enforcement measures under Chapter 7 apply. So the question really is, are Americans satisfied that the United States is in tandem with international law, because it's also being couched as a security operation? I heard one of the Republicans, I'm not sure if it was a senator, basically say what the U.S. is doing is it's imposing its supremacy, which it has a right to do. And in this case, it's to say that what it deems as undemocratically elected government of Maduro should be ousted and should be replaced with what the U.S. believes is fit for form in terms of democracy.
Well, it's not what the U.S. believes. I mean, Nicolas Maduro wouldn't report the results of the last presidential election because he lost. And it's the people of Venezuela and the Nobel Prize winner who was under severe police persecution and other opposition parties as well that he banned. I mean, he's not a democratically elected leader in any sense. That's not the Americans saying that. That's the world. That's other observers.
And I would challenge you in that, because there are many other ambassadors who are at the United Nations who are the Danish ambassador was critical of the U.S. action. You've seen South Africa itself.
Democratically, hold on. But on the question of whether he's a legitimate ruler, I don't think the Danes or anybody else in the democratic world can really make the case that Nicolas Maduro is the democratically elected president of Venezuela. He is not.
You asked me a question as in the midst of answering it, and those are people who are saying that this is a sovereign state and the U.S. action is illegal. Meaning that he was
illegal.
democratically elected. So
he was
let's
not
just
democratically elected.
So yes, that's your opinion. But let's continue with.
Yeah, but you're asking me my opinion. If you don't want my opinion, you don't have to invite
I
me
was
on the
saying
program.
you asked me. You asked me a question as well. So I'm replying to your question. So
but you didn't actually answer the question.
I actually did. You just didn't like the answer. I gave you the response. You didn't like the answer.
I will explain if you hold on. I will explain if you will allow me. There are two issues here. One is whether he's democratically elected. The other issue is whether it's a violation of international law to go into Venezuela and to arrest him. Question one is settled. He is not a democratically elected constitutional president of Venezuela, and anybody claiming otherwise is arguing against reality, okay? The other question about whether it's legal to do this in terms of international law, there may be countries that have stated a different view, but the opinion of the United States, and I believe the correct opinion, is that it's not illegal and that this has been done in the past to extract war criminals, drug traffickers, other tyrants, and I don't think there's any problem with international law whatsoever. The only criticisms that have been raised here domestically in the United States are whether this constitutes an act of war that would have required the approval of the House of Representatives. You know, under our Constitution, you can't go to war unless the House officially declares war. And that didn't happen in this case, but there's also a very strong argument that this wasn't an act of war, this was a law enforcement action, and so it didn't require the approval of Congress. But in terms of international law, at least from the American point of view, there's no problem whatsoever.
Now, I'm glad that you clarified that, at least from the American perspective. And as you say, at least from America, this is what you believe. So let's move on now to what happened on this day in January 6th and the legacy of Donald Trump, because I did ask the question if Americans do believe that he's delivering on his promises. So recent polling shows voters are focused on cost of living concerns over foreign policy. So how should the GOP balance America First rhetoric with these kitchen table issues, according to some critics?
Well, do you want me to answer about January 6th, or do you want me to answer about cost of living issues? Because you seem inclined to introduce January 6th into other issues. I mean, I can talk about January 6th.
I actually frame it quite clearly, because I talk about the legacy of U.S. President Donald Trump, how Americans are seeing it. And I actually line it up for you. I say there's some critics who say, based on recent polling, that they're voters who believe that America should be more focused on cost of living concerns over foreign policy. We are talking about what happened.
Right, but then you talk about January 6th. So what does that have to do with that?
We're just talking about Nicolas Maduro, and we're talking about the legacy of Donald Trump. Is he delivering on his promises? I think these are questions that are very clear. But perhaps if you would like to focus on a different point of view with regards to the anniversary, you're more than welcome to do so. But the questions are very clear, though.
No, it's okay. Well, the cost of living on several key indexes has come down. Inflation has stabilized or come down. And the U.S. economy is growing at a very rapid rate. And many Americans are pleased with that. Now, we do have a challenge, which is that with the investment in AI technology, you're seeing slower job growth in some industries, especially as a lot of the working capital is going into AI investments and not necessarily into expanding employment. And so that's going to be a challenge for employment as we move forward. And the Federal Reserve Bank also has a challenge, which is that if you have a very hot economy, which we do right now in terms of growth, you usually have to raise interest rates. But if you do that, then you raise other costs, like the cost of housing, the cost of credit. And so what we're dealing with is a very complicated situation that Donald Trump inherited from Joe Biden, but that he is having to focus on much more than he did in his first year, because I think, as you correctly point out, while there are a lot of foreign policy wins on the board, the bread and butter issues remain paramount. We've seen the price of fuel come down significantly. We've seen other prices come down. And in red states, conservative states, where energy prices tend to be lower because they don't have all these green energy mandates, you've also seen inflation slow to nearly zero in some places. But in blue states, like where I live, in California or Washington, D.C., or in New York, Illinois, where there are a lot of these green energy mandates, energy prices are high. Housing is also expensive, also largely due to environmental regulations and zoning. And so we really are becoming two nations when it comes to inflation. And Trump is struggling with that a bit because while we do have national economic policies, the states also have considerable autonomy. So it's hard to lower prices, for example, here in California, where I am right now, when the state government adds on January 1st a 1.5% surcharge on anything with a replaceable battery, like my cell phone. So you have to pay 1.5% more or up to $15 to buy that phone because of these new green mandates. And the blue states, the democratically run left-wing states, as opposed to the Republican-run red states, the Democratic states tend to have higher inflation, partly because they have all these mandates. That's a challenge. So I agree with you. He does need to focus more on the economy, and I think if voters can see some significant improvement in the price situation, and especially in household debt, by the time the midterm elections come around in November, then I think he'll be in a better position. Otherwise, he may lose control of Congress, at least one house of Congress, and then he'd be in a much more difficult political situation.
And last year, his speech really tended to focus quite a lot on shepherding his tax and spending cuts. If you were to look back a year later, has it landed with the American people? Are they seeing the fruits of that labor that he was pushing for?
Well, his approval ratings have gone up in the last few weeks, but I don't think that most Americans feel very confident right now about the future economically. It's just a high degree of uncertainty. And a lot of it does have to do with AI. And so the administration has got to grapple with the challenge of AI because people want the United States to be the leader in AI, but at the same time, there's a great sense of fear that once artificial intelligence becomes more widely adopted in the workplace, it's simply going to put some people out of work. And nobody really knows what that means. And people don't like the idea of a machine or a program doing the job that they've become used to doing, that they rely on for household expenses. So there's a great degree of uncertainty. And so there's an opportunity for the administration in that. But there are also some very severe challenges in that this is a completely new area of policy. And I think people are watching very carefully to see what he does.
And just with the midterm elections coming up, some of the issues that will be focused on more in the next couple of months, what would you say there would be? Because the Democrats are saying on this anniversary that there seems to be a whitewash of history. And it's that question that I was pointed to about the legacy of U.S. President Donald Trump. What is your view on that, and what has been put out there?
Well, January 6th is traditionally the date or around the date on which the House of Representatives certifies the presidential election. So every 4 years we have a January 6th. And for the last several elections in a row, every 4 years, Democrats have objected to a Republican winning the presidential election when that has happened. What Trump did on January 6th was exactly what Democrats had done in previous elections, including his own. They had tried to object to him being elected. And there was a riot at the Capitol, and people debate why there was a riot. Democrats have tried to accuse Trump of inciting it, which I think is disingenuous because he told people to protest peacefully. Republicans have said that Nancy Pelosi, who was Speaker at the time, didn't put enough security around the Capitol. And these questions will be debated by historians. But as in terms of how people think about American democracy, the ship has really sailed. I mean, Trump was reelected despite people knowing about January 6th and being subject to endless hearings on live television about January 6th. People went to the polls and reelected him anyway because they felt that Democrats, in their one-sided obsession with January 6th, were neglecting the things that people care about the most, and not just cost of living issues, but also issues like the border, which Joe Biden threw wide open and Donald Trump has now closed, the war against drugs, which Donald Trump is pursuing with great energy. And so January 6th doesn't really mean much anymore. I think people are not focused on that as we come to the midterms. There are people who are trying to talk about it. I mean, California Governor Gavin Newsom is warning, I think absurdly, that Trump is going to try to steal the next election somehow and that it has something to do with January 6th. But really, as you pointed out earlier, the bread and butter issues, the cost of living issues, those are really paramount. And I think that people aren't thinking about this as some kind of important anniversary. For me, here in California, the important anniversary is January 7th, because that's when big portions of LA burnt down, actually, through government neglect. And we're sitting on the 1-year anniversary of that fire and looking back at a year and how much has been done and how much hasn't been done. And what we see is that often when governments at the state and local level, and sometimes at the federal level, when governments prioritize other things other than basic security and the basic needs of residents, they often miss the very real risks that just come with living in an environment that has natural disasters and so forth. I mean, the government has to take care of the basics first. Before you start redistributing wealth and figuring out how to create a utopian society, you've got to provide basic security. And Los Angeles and California really did not do that. I mean, this is the fourth largest economy in the world, just the state of California. And yet it couldn't stop a fire from spreading. So those are questions people are thinking about.
Before my producer has me for lunch, it's a question actually I want to follow up on, because I saw statistics saying, I think with, I don't know how many houses were burnt down, but it actually says that only 3 have been successfully rebuilt thus far. Is that an accurate reflection?
That is correct. And you have over 6,000 homes burnt down in the Palisades fire, on the Eaton fire, on the other side of LA, which happened the same day, a similar number. And the pace of rebuilding has been very slow because of local bureaucracy, because of insurance company payouts being very slow and often too little for rebuilding, and because of high construction costs.
I saw that.
And so we have a lot of issues to work through here, and a lot of dysfunctional government and a dysfunctional relationship right now between the state and the federal government. You know, politically, if you want to watch something interesting developing with regard to the future, Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, is probably going to run for president in 2028. And in COVID, during the pandemic, he worked very well with President Trump in his first term. But in his second term, he's chosen a much more confrontational approach because he's setting himself up as the Democratic opposition leader for the 2028 elections. That, however, has ruined his relationship with Trump and the White House, and it's made it much harder for California to argue for federal funding that it needs to address the aftermath of the fires. So in a sense, the rebuilding effort has been caught in the political crossfire, and this fight between Gavin Newsom in California and Republicans on the national stage is moving into the spotlight, and I think you'll see more of that as we head into 2028.
Joel, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate your insights and your sharing your thoughts. Joel Pollack is California Post opinion editor, reflecting on a number of issues in the U.S. at the moment. As we mentioned, the trial of Nicolas Maduro, opinions amongst Americans about what is happening, and also the multilateral system in terms of the democratic order, democratic governance, international governance, and also speaking about the January 6th anniversary, saying it's really not a bigger deal as some make it to be, that people are more concerned about the day-to-day issues. It is now 28 minutes to 10.
Siyabangena manje. Vito Jablan Kolele Imagoda. Jablan is a young man from Giyani in Limpopo in South Africa. A very easy guy, taking things easy. To know me is to know that I love what I do, which I'm crazy about it. So when you hear me on radio, expect the best. Expect great music. Expect great content. Expect 180 minutes of nothing but fun. You'll find me on the morning reset, 3 to 6 a.m., Monday to Friday. Siyabangena baba. Ay. Mbuleke.
1 hour, 1 continent, 1 voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And it is now 27 minutes to 10. Zimbabwe stands at a crossroads with Africa's former breadbasket facing the choice between coalition or collapse, reform or ruin, succession or stagnation. This is according to Zimbabwe's Zimbabwean journalist Wellington Muzengeza's article, Coalition or Collapse, Zimbabwe's Choice Between Reform and Ruin. He explores the themes of political succession, economic transition and inclusive governments to determine if Zimbabwe is on path of what he calls reform or ruin, and to talk to us about the potential consequences of the 2030 presidential term extension debate for democratic stability. We are joined now by journalist Wellington. It's such a good time to speak to you, especially given the fact that we spoke, what was it, almost 2 weeks ago, and we're just looking at other issues just to do with Africa and the democratic trajectory. But this time we are talking about Zimbabwe. Wellington Muzengeza.
Yes. Good evening, Tsepiso. Thank you for having me. Yes, it is quite interesting. That 2 weeks ago we were speaking about the rest of Africa, but this time it's my mother country, Zimbabwe indeed.
Sorry, just say that again, Wellington. We just missed you for a moment.
All right, I'm saying thank you very much for having me tonight. It's a pleasure, as always. It was a pleasure, of course, speaking to you 2 weeks ago when we were speaking about other issues to do with our continent. Today, we're back discussing Zimbabwe, the elections that we are expecting in 2028.
Yes, and it's.
Sorry?
I'm saying yes, and we've been watching that very closely, watching the rumors, the machinations within the ruling ZANU-PF party. But it almost seems like for those who believe or who present even evidence that Zimbabwe remains authoritarian, so the term coalition, we've seen it happen before, but it failed. It seems a very surprising suggestion.
Yeah, Zimbabwe stands at a crossroads indeed. And the coalition is no longer something that should be a luxury for Zimbabwe. I think it's the only viable path forward, considering that we have had in the last 25 years about 40% of the electorate actually voting for the opposition. So any outcome of the election in 2028 must consider a coalition. I'm diagnosing the crisis, but I would also like to prescribe some kind of reform, not just lamenting collapse, because what we are emphasizing is that coalition politics is about stability and legitimacy, not necessarily weakness. So for Zimbabwe in 2028, it's either coalition or collapse, reform or ruin, succession or stagnation. You see, if Zimbabwe faces a really stark choice, either we embrace coalition politics and reform or slide deeper into authoritarian relapse and economic ruin. The current whispers of President Mnangagwa extending his rule beyond 2028 are really symptomatic of a broader problem where we see that post-liberation governments are struggling to translate liberation into legitimate succession. Without an inclusive settlement that acknowledges the opposition's rightful place in governance, Zimbabwe risks repeating cycles of repression and instability because there is a full unsatisfied constituency that remains underrepresented and disgruntled.
So just in terms of what is practical and what is not, and by what is practical, I mean a meeting of minds, because goodwill is one thing, and just to look back at the constitutional manipulations that we've seen in the past, the broken promises, the authoritarian relapse. How sure are we that this is a make or break for Zimbabwe that is recognized by the leaders at the helm?
Well, it will be make or break, because in the last 25 years, when we have had a formidable opposition movement, with the movement for democratic change that was led by Morgan Tsvangirai and other formations of that political party, until the last real opposition movement which was called the Citizen Coalition for Change, which was led by Nelson Chamisa, we have not seen any traction. So at the end of the day, we know that coalition politics is what is going to matter for Zimbabwe. And it's not a weakness. It's just a mechanism for legitimacy and stability. Zimbabwe's fractured political landscape requires power sharing to prevent collapse. We saw that in 2008, 2009, after the government of national unity. Things changed in Zimbabwe. So risk of collapse, if reform is ignored, is real. And economic stagnation will continue in Zimbabwe, and it will spill over into SADC.
So just talk to us exactly how you see that unfolding and why. And also just speaking to us about SADC's role in it. We were just speaking with SADC's Secretary General of the organ of politics. And
right, reform would look like, right, the way I see it, reform could look like there should be an inclusive dialogue between the ruling party and the opposition. This business of leaving the opposition out of any nation-building exercises is not practical. It's not real. And there must be constitutional safeguards against term extensions. There is talk within ZANU-PF right now. They've what they're calling 2030, Operation 2030, or there are rumors that the president wants to extend unconstitutionally, of course, his term, so that he is there until until 2030. Yet the constitution says there has to be elections that have to be done in 2028. So reform should include economic reform, which is tied to political legitimacy, so that investors and citizens alike build or rebuild confidence in the government system in Zimbabwe. And then we also expect regional mediation, like you say, SADC and AU. They must play a role in nudging Zimbabwe towards reform. Last time we had President Mbeki intimately involved in the Zimbabwean impasse. And it's important that we have regional anchor, so that we avoid the implications that we have for SADC. Like, for example, as long as we continue having dysfunctional governance systems in Zimbabwe, there will always be migration pressure on countries like South Africa. South Africa, as we speak, is already bearing the brunt of Zimbabwean problems. We have security risks, where we have political instability risks spilling into the region, undermining SADC's credibility as a guarantor of peace and stability. No one can take SADC seriously if they can't help, if they can't give a serious hand in the Zimbabwean crisis. And it's been 25 years, going to 30 years now. We have got the economic drag that is going on. Zimbabwe's collapse weakens regional trade corridors, investment confidence, and integration projects. Integration projects in the region, which had SADC's collective growth agenda. Then we've got obviously diplomatic paralysis. SADC's silence on indecision, it's legitimate. So if it cannot act decisively on Zimbabwe, its authority in other crises will be questioned. You see, and then we have a whole section of young people that is now disillusioned. We have youth across the region that see Zimbabwe as a cautionary tale. Failure to reform deepens cynicism and liberation movements and democratic promises. You see? So the implications of a dysfunctional Zimbabwe are dire for Zimbabwe itself, for the region itself, and for South Africa specifically.
Now, I just want to talk about the financiers and factional barons that you describe as the scaffolding of the current power. What is needed from them, and especially to achieve what you say is being overlooked and is important, ensuring that Zimbabwean cities are livable cities, functional cities? We're not just talking about urban planning, but, as you say, infrastructure.
Right. When we talk about the institutional scaffolding of the Zimbabwean politics, we're saying that ZANU-PF, as it stands right now, it's behaving as if it got exclusive rights to rule Zimbabwe. Yet we know that it's not true. They did not have 90% or over 60% of the vote. There is a constituent that actually voted 40% of the electorate that actually voted successfully in the last election. But because of shenanigans that was happening, the infiltration of the opposition movement, we ended up having the main opposition players abdicating their role in opposition politics in Zimbabwe. And what we have is a pseudo-opposition that is in charge of so-called opposition in parliament and other democratic institutions. So the opposition has been infiltrated and a dummy opposition is in place. So as long as this continues, it's going to be a problem in 2028. That's what we are saying. The succession politics that is happening in Zimbabwe today is not only going to be decided by the internal politics of ZANU-PF. It must be decided also by opposition forces, because the opposition is a system of checks and balances that any functional democracy needs. And right now, Zimbabwe, as it stands, is a dysfunctional democracy. It is relapsing into the authoritarianism that we saw under Mugabe.
Well, Wellington, I'm sure we will speak again about many other issues of interest and for you to share your opinion. But as usual, we do thank you for taking the time to engage us and to just share your thoughts. Wellington, much appreciated, just speaking to us about his recent article. It's called Coalition or Collapse, Zimbabwe's Choice Between Reform and Ruin. Wellington Muzengeza, Zimbabwean journalist. It brings the time to 16 minutes to 10.
Je, una jambo lolote akilini mwako? Je, una shauku kuhusu masuala muhimu? Na je, una maoni ambayo unataka yasikike? Kweli, hili jukwaa ni la kwako. Piga simu au tuandikie kwenda WhatsApp namba alama ya kujumulisha 2760552594 na tutakupigia simu.
Mtangazaji wa habari zetu za Afrika Kusini mjini Johannesburg.
Hivyo unaweza kuwa mshirika kwenye matangazo yetu. Sio mazungumzo tu, ni fursa yako ya kuchangia maoni yako na kushirikiana na jumuiya ya wasikilizaji wanaotamani mtazamo wako. Tufuate kwenye mitandao ya kijamii. Tembelea tovuti yetu www.channelafrica.co.za na uwe tayari kushiriki na kuchangia maoni yako kwenye Channel Africa. Channel Africa, mtazamo wa Kiafrika.
Ahoy, matey.
Captain here to help, right, boys?
Set sail with us on a digital voyage like no other. Channel Africa has a treasure trove of awesomeness. That is our website and social media pages.
Tell me, why are you here?
We want you to be part of our adventure.
The winds are changing, Captain. And this time...
Imagine a world where curiosity knows no bounds, where entertainment meets enlightenment, and where every click leads to the African perspective. Visit us on our website, www.channelafrica.co.za, or follow us on Instagram or on X at Channel Africa 1. Go on, like us on Facebook at Channel Africa 1. So, spread the word. Tell a friend that Channel Africa's online variety is what they need on the web. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
14 minutes to 10, that is exactly what we're doing, winding down, and not winding down because we're talking about something that is a slowing down, that has absolutely zero energy or plug, but we are talking about preparations underway for at the Nigerian city of Lagos to host the 9th All Africa Music Awards from tomorrow. Organizers of this year's All Africa Music Awards promise to turn Nigeria's economic powerhouse into the global capital of sound, with planned 5 days of high-octane events from Africa Music Business Summit to the grand awards ceremony at the Echo Convention Center. And we will hopefully be speaking to the executive producer of Afrima, Mike Dada, in just a moment. But basically, they are going to share with us the vision behind this massive cultural earthquake that they have termed, and the man who spent over a decade championing for the African creative economy, the president and executive producer of Afrima, Mike Dada, joins us. A very good evening to you, Mike, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Go ahead.
Mike Dada, you with us now?
Yes, I am with you.
Good evening, and thank you so much for speaking to us. You know, as I'm reading this introduction, I'm asking myself, how did I not land myself in Lagos for this? I think something went horribly wrong, and we must fix it.
I honestly, I think, by the way, I think so. I agree with you absolutely.
All right. So just tell us exactly how the preparations are at the moment, what is going on, what can people expect?
Okay. The preparations in top gear. The event will be hosted in Lagos, which is the official host city for Afrima this year, and we hope to be in South Africa next editions, definitely. The preparations, what do people expect this year? Is to expect the convergence of the African music superstars across Africa and the diaspora to display the magnificence and the high-level creativity of Africans. That's what it's all about for us.
And I want to start with the musicians, because we are truly, truly wealthy as Africa. We're seeing it on international stages everywhere. Every concert that you're seeing, it's being headlined in some form or another by an African artist. So the types of people that we're expecting to be at Afrima this year, please tell us a little bit more about the acts.
Okay. We have the acts from across 5 regions of Africa, and of course diaspora. And that's been a tradition in the last 15 years of Afrima. Artists from Negratuto from Morocco, Ibrahim Mohammed from Egypt itself, Ahmed Diab from Egypt. We have Caesar from South Africa. We have Emo from South Africa. Interesting and unfortunately, Makazi was expected to perform as usual as a South African superstar, but we learned she was involved in an accident. We wish her soonest recovery. We have Mapforiza from South Africa as well. We have Wizkid coming from Lagos. Of course, that is his base. Davido as well. We have Tufan from Togo. We have Black Sherry from Ghana. We have Inosbi from DRC. Falipupa from DRC. Well, a whole lot of them. So even the OGs, what we call Capo Snoop from Angola, coming. Even Kofi Olomide, who won the legendary award in 2021, will be joining us as well.
You had me at Kofi Olomide. I'm definitely booking my ticket, even if it's in South Africa. So I want to explore the theme, connect, build, own, and also why you chose to reschedule it from late 2025 to January 7 to 11 in 2026. Was there any particular significance and how that also works hand in hand with the theme of particularly the Business Summit, Connect, Build, Own?
Okay. What really led to we rescheduling to January has to do with a logistic reason, because that was why we rescheduled. But the theme for the South African Music Business Summit, Connect, Own, Build, has to do with our understanding based on analysis and research that African music and musicians are doing well globally, like you said, rightly put it. We are headlining major festivals and concerts around the world. But the truth of the matter is we are not owning anything. The economic growth that ought to come with that, with the growth of African music, it does not reflected in the economic empowerment of our people. So we are looking at this year's summit critically to say, how do we own the infrastructure? Because Africans don't own the DSPs. None of the DSPs, whether it's Spotify or Tidal, is being owned by Africans. The super infrastructures that are being owned by Africa that support music business in Africa. So what we're trying to say is to say, how can we connect more? Rather than look outward the continent, can we look inward internally and connect more as the people, collaborate more as the people, embark on African circuit and tours. Just imagine we have tours in big cities, about 200 cities in Africa. The implication of that is that there will be a lot of money for the artists. There will be a lot of experiences for Africans themselves, but we'll not be able to explore that. We understand that there are infrastructure challenges, vis-a-vis venues, vis-a-vis equipment and gears for organizing or having world-class concerts and shows across many cities, say for a few cities on the continent. So we're looking at it critically to say, in terms of investment, in terms of economic growth for our people, many artists in Africa, they live famous, but they die in poverty. How can we reverse this kind of narrative and story? Those are the things that we're looking at under the theme of Connect, Own, and Build from there moving forward, and then leveraging technology, AI, Internet of Things to see how we can, how Africans can benefit more from their cultural assets and cultural products.
And I see that the 9th edition, the tag of this is Unstoppable Africa. And as you're speaking about things of ownership, I'm wondering, are there masterclasses inbuilt into the events? Are there, skills transfer mechanisms, even with global partners, that are going to help African artists reclaim that ownership, especially of digital streaming platforms and infrastructure? That is a major challenge.
Oh, okay. You're very correct. That's part of the thing I was saying, that even some of the infrastructure is not being owned by Africans themselves, DSP, digital streaming platform. So there are master classes, there are one-on-one. The essential of the summit is to connect with the big players in the music industry across the globe who are going to be present at the summit. And because the difference in development for youth in Africa and youth in Western world is access to opportunities to quality, to education, quality education, and access to finance. Those are the gaps that we really want to bridge during the summit itself, and understanding how do we tap or leverage or take advantage of the entire value chain of the music industry, from songwriting to ideation to creation to production to marketing to promotion, licensing, publishing, to festivals and all of that. And a whole lot of opportunity and skills required and the value chain itself. And these are the things we're looking at to say, how can we create more jobs for our people, for our young people? How can we use the music industry, the music ecosystem, take our young people away from the street? Those are the conversations we want to be having. How can we make it more enterprising and entrepreneurial for our people when they see economic and economic interest in the music industry more than just for entertainment, for enjoyment. Also, beyond that, you should see that as a tool for social re-engineering. And those are the kind of things we're looking at, because there's need for a mindset shift. And we believe that music is a purveyor of value that can be relied upon to communicate those key mindset shifts that is urgently required on the continent.
Just a quick one for those who won't be attending. How are we able to view this AFRIMA event?
Okay, for those who will not be attending, is that what you're saying?
Yes. Where can we watch it? Is there going to be live streaming of it?
Okay, there's a live streaming of it on the AFRIMA YouTube, AFRIMA Awards YouTube. At AFRIMA Awards. It's going to be broadcast with 4 countries around the world with our media partners, MultiChoice, Canal+, all them. There's channel 196. You can see it anywhere around the world. There are many African broadcaster partners that are going to be seen as well. YouTube platform, even the Facebook platform, our social media platforms. But from just glue to it, you see everything live and direct.
Awesome. And we look forward to attending it, experiencing it live next year, wherever you are. We'll certainly be watching this year. That is the All Africa Music Awards, the 9th edition. And we're speaking there to the president and executive producer of AFRIMA, Mike Dada, who's talking to us about that event coming up in Lagos, starting tomorrow, 7 to 11. And that brings the time to 3, I'd say 3.5, but let's make it 3 minutes to 10. And I don't know, are you feeling like she's hot? Yes, she's hot, but now she's just she came into the studio fanning herself to say, I'm here and I'm hot.
Wow. How are you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm burning.
This
weather is not, I am not coping.
I told them that actually, the way I'm dressed should tell you. I'm giving myself maximum capacity to enjoy the fresh air. Like, it's just, Batong, it's really hot.
It is. But what also is hot is our first guest. Her name is Shanae Wallace, and she is a cheesemaker. Right, hers. Ooh. I know, right? Hers is a very interesting story. It starts in 2002. She matriculates and then realizes, listen, I can't just be sitting at home doing nothing, and so I'm going to get into the business of making cheese. And so we're going to be essentially getting to know her through her craft, but also delving into her interest in fashion and how this is fusing into this cheese creation. So that's in the first hour.
Girl,
Pila. You know what? You're onto something. And then in the second hour of the show, we touch base with the founder of the Soweto Rotary Community Corps, and we're going to see how they're partnering up with various Rotary clubs to change the course of Soweto. And so I really am excited to talk about that, specifically because there's stereotypes we want to debunk there.
Well, I don't know what stereotypes you'll be debunking, but what I know is that Rotarians generally, and people who've done or had some sort of connections with Rotary Club, will realize that they actually have so many resources that they can share with not only people who are underprivileged, but who just don't have access to resources because of proximity. We're talking rural areas. I've done work with them in the past through the Nelson Mandela Foundation and Bread Life Africa. And my passion in particular, obviously, has always been books and giving out books. And I thought to myself, there's so many young children who can't read because we say they don't have books, but there's actually access.
Yeah.
And actually things like, bedding, linen, it's amazing the amount of resources they have. But before we go, Lane and I were talking about something. So I was talking about bags.
Okay.
And I was talking about something that I found on Instagram that I was like, oh, I got it. It's so cute. And I've been like lusting after it for about a whole year. Then she mentions something that she bought. She's like, oh my gosh, I got scammed on Instagram. I'm like, what? She's like, yes, it's called my SA leather. I'm like, don't. Because guess what? The interesting thing is I saw this lovely bag on a cousin, and it's called and Zanella, I've been very open to you about that. I was going to talk about this. It's I think it's my SA leather bags, but anyway, she advertises it as her store is closing down, 70% sale, and both Elaine and I bought, and before that there was somebody who was also critical of it, who used the word scammed. And of course, I know that has legal implications. But my thing is, my interaction with Zanele, I say to her, and I've got a lot of SA leather goods. I'm proudly South African, guys. I'm a patriot when it comes to African made goods, made in Africa, made in South Africa. I was like, this looks nothing like, and actually it says it's coming somewhere from China. I'm like, Kanchani. The reason I'm buying my SA leather bags is because I am buying from here, Mzansi Phakathi inside.
Wow.
I figure my bags. But what kind? And then she's like, well, it's vegan leather. I'm like, mama, I'm all about sustainability. And for those who know me, I'm a champion of that. I'll say loudly and proudly, I get into projects because of that. I'm like, but why don't you just advertise them like that? Because those who want to buy vegan leather, and let's talk about terminology while we're at it. What exactly is vegan?
Ma'am, it's just like
is it
vegan patties.
Bacon? Is
exactly.
it bacon plant-based?
I think so.
Then
we have no idea what leather from plant-based material would look like.
I've seen that these two ladies, and I must actually get them. Mo and her sister Kalibela Rukuma, they've got this. I think it's Mo's Shack, the business. They do amazing leather stuff and vinyl. Like it is awesome. So can we talk about transparency and buying online, and we need to have a show about this.
Here's the thing, Tsepiso. If you want people to be transparent, will they be as supportive? I'm not supporting being nuanced in the way you advertise, right, for the benefit of your business,
but
right?
I am.
Yeah, proudly South African business. Where the stock comes from is another conversation. Number one. Number two, I think with the vegan leg, I don't know how to defend on that end. I really have nothing to say. I'm just like, okay, ma'am. All right.
And I think, and it's exactly that thing about advertising. When you say South African leather bags, we know sinayo ileda apha ku South eMzansi a.
The owner is South African.
Akir. And then utla ole kwa Taiwan uputsa rona u vegan bag. Oh, guys, grata di falafel as much as the next person, but can I not just carry my goods in a falafel bag?
And it's on that dreary note that we say
goodbye.
That's what we can expect of the show.
All right, thank you, Shaylin. Up next is African Diaries. We've already started the first chapter of the Diaries from African World Hour. We're going, continental, international, and right into the Diaries. You can see the synergy in these shows and why they named as such. That's it from us. Good night.
Conversations that touch the heart and inspire change.